We're here to talk about insights for ArcGIS. Welcome. Hopefully we're having a good week so far at the Dev Summit. Just to let everyone know, this session is being recorded. So it will be recorded and available afterwards as well. So without further ado, what do you say we get started? My name is Arthur Haddad. I'm one of the people in charge of this product as well as a number of other products here at Esri. I'm joined by my colleague, Linda Beal.
Hi.
And let's get started. How many folks here are familiar with insights, using insights? Okay, a few people. That's good. That's good. It is still a fledgling product. It's only a couple of years old. We're still continuing to improve on it and build on it. So let's see what it's all about for those who don't know what it is. What Insights for ArcGIS is about analytics. We're targeting all analysts that want to perform analysis to include the spatial dimension. In other words, what we've created is an analytics workbench. It's designed for self-service analysis. You do not have to be a GIS expert to make use of insights. Do not have to be a GIS expert to make use of insights. I say that twice because a lot of people think, oh, this is a product from Esri, I've got to be a GIS professional. Actually, no, it's designed quite the opposite. It's designed not for the GIS professional. We work with both spatial and non-spatial data alike. We treat everything as a first-class citizen. But the important part is the spatial part, because after all, we are Esri and we are a GIS company. Multi-source data-driven analysis. I'm sure you've heard this across the board. For example, our good friends at Microsoft with Power BI. They are a multi-source data-driven analytics application, and guess what? We work with them too, right? We have a product known as Maps for Power BI, and that works inside there too. But this is different than that. It's designed to be interoperable with all the analytic products out there, not to be in that competitive space, if you will. However, whenever you deal with analytics in general, you have to work with data. So we work with data across the board. Obviously, we work with all the GIS stuff. Anything you have within your ArcGIS assets, we can work with. Feature services, feature layers, etc. Whether they're in geodatabases, shapefiles, KML, GeoJSON, we work with it. We obviously need to work with Excel. How many people do not work with Excel? Ah, that was a trick question. You all got it right. Most people work with Excel. Hands down, it's one of the most successful spreadsheet products out there, and a lot of people use it for messing around with their data. And of course, databases. We directly connect, and I mean directly connect, to things like SQL Server, HANA, Oracle, PostgreSQL, PostGIS. So there are direct connections in there. And if you have geodatabases in those databases, guess what? We directly connect to geodatabase tables as well. No more need to publish those geodatabase tables as feature classes into a feature layer and then consume the feature layer. We talk directly to the database. So a lot of people ask, does it work in the cloud? Yes. Insights for ArcGIS works with ArcGIS Online. Does it work on premises? Yes. It's also a part of ArcGIS Enterprise. So we work collectively across the board. Then the next question is, so why did we build it? Well, there's a lot of reasons why we built it. The first one is we need to be able to take advantage of the spatial dimension in a very clean and succinct way across all data types, data sources. Here's another reason. One of the things that you've noticed in the world of analysis over the past few years is the latest trend in all these technologies starting to bleed together. Concepts known as computer science or business intelligence workflows and geographical information systems are starting to bleed together. It's kind of an interesting trend. You can start seeing more Python, more R being a participant in these things. More things that include the location element of your data. And a lot of people don't realize that I'd say, and this is, I don't have the fact to back it up, but I'm going to go ahead and put my opinion out there. 80% of the world's data has a locatable element to it, whether it's a coordinates that's been captured whether it's an address somewhere in the system or a standard geographic boundary like census data. But a lot of people are not taking advantage of those location elements. But a lot of people need to, right? So we started to see a lot of blending of these technologies, and with the blending of these technologies, you start seeing a lot of blending of these disciplines. You can start seeing a lot of disciplines start coming together in the world of analysis. Whether you're a programmer, you're a statistician, you're a GIS professional, all of these disciplines within those blended technologies start to come to play. Let's not forget about the instant gratification. How many folks do not have a smartphone? Yeah, another trick question. Most people have these things. And guess what? The consumerization of IT is over. The battle's been won. Consumers have won. We know what we like. We download it, we use it. If we don't like it, we get rid of it, we put something else on there. Simple, convenient, easy to use. So all of these things in the industry started to come together, right? Customers have choice. Customers want simplicity. They don't want to have to relearn a whole thing over a learning curve of six months to a year. They want to start using it immediately. For those reasons and many more that I can't cover in this hour that we have together, Insights itself was designed to facilitate data exploration, visualization, and analysis to include the spatial dimension in such a way that you do not have to be a GIS professional or expert to figure it out. That's an important statement. Think about those workflows that you have. A few short clicks away. One of the design principles we have is 3 clicks or less, drag and drop friendly, and of course, it's got to be simple. Information that's available in your data should be readily accessible and used. I shouldn't have to go searching for something. It should just be right there. You can start thinking about, if you can see it, you can touch it, you should be able to do something with it in the user experience. So even the user experience is designed to apply that speed of thought style of analysis. And if location is really important to you, as you'll see in our demos that we're going to have, insights and analysis with that location is going to be very important to you as well.
So we've mentioned already that Insights is designed for analysis. That's what it's about. It's an analysis workbench. But we've also noticed recently, over the sort of last few years, that the kind of the process of analysis, how we go about doing analysis, has changed. It used to be very much a case of we would start with a question, so we knew what we wanted to answer. We would then go out and collect the data. Now collecting the data for some people is standing in a field and collecting it. For other people, it's going online or going through the data sets you have at your company to see what kind of data sets you can then use to answer that question. Well, as we're collecting more and more data just as standard, a lot of businesses are just collecting the data, and then you, as the analyst, are being asked, well, what's the data showing us? Tell us what's going on. You need to find an answer. So that's kind of reversed the process, because we're no longer starting with the question, getting the data to match the question. We're actually starting with the data, and then we need to determine from that data what is the kind of question we can ask of that, what's reasonable of this kind of data. It may be that the data is missing the temporal component, so therefore you can't do a temporal analysis. It may be that one of the fields you're looking for has got missing nulls in there or something. So you have to have a good understanding of what that data is and whether you can ask that type of question as it. Is it being collected at a reasonable spatial resolution for you to actually answer that kind of question? So that kind of leads us more into an exploratory phase. So we need to explore that data. We also need to have in our mind all of the kind of questions that can be asked of data. So we're actually now having to be experts in all the fields, in understanding the data, in determining from that what questions we can ask. So things are very much changing from a sort of deductive approach to analysis a lot more into an inductive approach, in that we're exploring it, we're seeing the data, and from that we're pulling out the questions and hypotheses that we can ask of that data. So we very much designed Insights to fit in with that kind of idea. So it should be something that you can instantly get feedback, that you can kind of drill down into that data, understand it, and then decide what kind of analysis that you can do based on that. So there's a lot of different types of analysis we can do within it. These are all obviously standalone in themselves. They don't follow any patterns. So you can do things like calculate fields. You can do calculations on it. You can geocode the data, be it addresses, coordinates, or we can join it to any geographic shapefiles we have, polygons, feature layers. We can also do exploratory analysis. That's very much a key part of it, creating maps, charts, and tables. They are equal citizens, so if it makes sense to do it on a map, do it on a map. If it's actually something that's important to 4 decimal places, you're not going to pull that out from the map. Then looking at it as a table makes a lot more sense. Obviously, we've put spatial analysis in there. That's our key thing. But we also have added in a number of different statistical analysis that you can do in there, starting basically with descriptive statistics so that you can understand that data, you can pull out things from it. We work very much visually, so we always create some kind of visual card so you can see what's going on in that data. But we also produce the statistics on the back of all the cards so you can quantify what you can see as well. And those two things should be done hand in hand so that you can confirm what you think that you're seeing in terms of the data. We're also now going into more advanced analysis, so we're moving into sort of regression. We've got ordinary least squares of regression in there as well. We also do link analysis, which is something that allows you to explore importance of different features within your data. We can record everything you do, so whenever you're doing your analysis, even though it's a very easy environment to work with, we actually automatically build up that model for you, and then you can rerun that analysis with other data sets that you have. And of course, as well as doing the analysis, it's important that we share our analysis. At the end of it, there always comes a point when you would want to share out the results. And we've tried to sort of make that very much a part of the analysis thing. It's not that you have to go somewhere else or that you have to then rebuild what you've done. We've tried to make it as seamless as part of the analysis so that you can quickly share out what you've done as part of that process.
Yeah, we actually started with a phrase when we first came up with Insights, and it was, data is very important. However, it's not as important as the answers it provides or the stories that it tells. Getting to the answers follows all of these workflows. Telling those stories that those answers provide is all about the sharing of those results. So Insights is geared towards analysis and then telling the story that the analysis finds. In the end, what we're talking about is powerful analysis made simple. How many folks have seen Insights? Okay. For the rest of you, you'll see this in just a minute. Let's get another set of slides. But again, powerful analysis made simple, whether you're exploring the data, whether you're handed a bunch of data and say, now go do something data science-y with it. You can explore it, you can figure it out. You have a question to it, whatever. You want to relate and overlay different data sets. You want to understand what's going on with that data. Insights is that application. It's analytics. It's powerful analysis made simple. So a lot of people ask, so who's this really for? Well, that's a very good question. If you're an analyst, this is for you. If location is important, this is for you. There's a number of different roles that we've come across, whether you're a GIS analyst, you're an industry expert, a data scientist, business analyst, et cetera, et cetera. All of those roles are important. And for that reason, Insights understands, or with Insights, any of those roles can understand a different part of Insights that they want to work with. In the end, it's designed for all analysis, whether you're doing interactive pages and ultimately sharing those interactive reports, creating your analytic models, creating those methodologies that your organization needs for those analytic workflows, or you're basically just trying to figure something out with a piece of data that you have. You're a viewer, you're an analyst, and you're working with data. So we go across all of those roles. Another very important thing, a lot of folks are either using GIS data or they're using business data. And getting it into one place generally requires a workflow to take your business data and enable a location with it and then start working with that. Well, Insights allows you to work with both in one place. In other words, I have an Excel file. No spatial in it whatsoever. I can simply drag and drop that in, start working with it, and start doing my analysis. If it has a piece of location to it, let's say it's has a city, state, a zip code, enabling location against that is very simple. Literally within 3 clicks, I can enable location on that non-spatial piece of information. I can join that across business tables and spatial data. I can create views on the fly. Working with data in one place is a very important aspect of your analysis. Again, simplicity, convenience, one of those things. I kind of jumped ahead with the location enabling, but I'm not just talking about geocoding, right? Location enablement with your data is a number of things. Geocoding is a part of it, right? And in the technical sense, geocoding is all of it, but let's break it apart. A lot of data is being captured based on a set of coordinates. If you're doing any field mobility using our field worker apps, those are collecting coordinates and bringing those in as feature data. Or if you're just on a smartphone, you're capturing point data along the way. That data has coordinates. You have an address, or you have multiple addresses in there. You can think about from and a to. We can work with multiple shape files, with multiple shape fields within the same data set. We'll talk more about that in a minute. That's a little bit different than traditional ways of dealing with GIS layers. The GIS layer has one shape file, one shape field, per layer. With Insights, the equivalent to a layer is known as a data set, and a data set can have multiple shape columns in it. We'll talk about that in a minute. But what about areas of interest or geography? That too is a way of enabling location with your data, and we take advantage of all of that. So without talking any more about this, let's switch over to Linda's machine, and let's take a quick walkthrough of what Insights is so you can get a good sense of it. Great. You're there.
We're there. Okay. Actually, let's start very much from the beginning here. So we have designed a new homepage for those of you who are used to it. So this will be at the next release. For those of you who are not, this is where you start in terms of Insights. We actually break down how you can do that as the analyst. So you can see you can access the workbooks, which is where you actually start your work. There's also the models. If you remember, I mentioned we record everything as you go. So this is a place where you can get to the models. You can also see the data sets that you have, and you can import new data sets directly to here. Connections, if you want to connect directly into any of the databases we mentioned, you can connect to the databases there. Pages, so this is when we're sharing out the results, so this is more in terms of the presentation. And also themes, which is a new feature which allows you to actually design how you want something to look, and then you can then set the page to look like that just before you share it out. So let's jump into one of the workbooks. So I'm going to show you one that's kind of already been set up here, so you can see very much how we can start to work with this. So I'm just going to briefly show you. We'll go into more detail in a later demonstration, but you'll see the idea is that you can just drag and drop the variables of interest. So whatever you actually want to look at, you can drag that out. And you can create all sorts of different visualizations. There are many different ways that we can actually look at this data. So you'll see if I drag these two across, you'll see, depending on the type of data, you can see all sorts of different ways of actually visualizing it. Everything is interactive by default, so you can immediately pick that out. We can enable the data, so we can turn that geographical. And then, of course, we can start to visualize that by any of the pieces, any of the components, again, features of interest that you're interested in. So you can see here we're making maps, charts, and tables. Doesn't matter which you want to do, you can change between them all. So I could change this to actually being something like a bar chart, to actually see the results of that as a chart or a table. So everything is very much interactive, as we were talking about. The idea is that enabling you to explore that data, and of course to see the statistics on the back of anything. You'll see we can report the statistics on the back of all of these cards, so you always have access to that information to quantify what it is that you think you're seeing on any of the cards. In terms of the models, you'll see, if I turn over to this analysis view, you'll see those few things that I've done just there have instantly made a model that can also be shared out and rerun by other people. And of course, when it comes to sharing the results at the end, I'm just going to switch to one I've already set up. There are a number of different controls that we now give you that will enable you to bring in sort of videos, images, whatever, to decide how you actually want to color the whole thing. So you can change all sorts of different colors. You can change the options on any of the cards themselves. So you can now also change things like how you actually see the information on the axis. So you can actually go in and change all of the words if you want to change it when you're going out. But you can see that this is pretty similar to what I was doing before, in the sense that you can, of course, still do further analysis. So I can still drag that on and continue on to do the analysis within here. So you'll see we don't separate out the sharing of the results. I still have the ability to do all of the analysis directly within here. So that's a very quick explore of insights. We will come back and go through actually running analysis in a minute, but we just wanted to give everyone an opportunity to see it before we moved on and described the process a little bit more.
Yeah, that was really a whirlwind look at insights without having to look through a bunch of menus or toolbars, working directly with the data. If you're interested in information that the data is, simply grab that and drag it. Again, the thing that she showed was workbooks are the primary mechanism working with insights. And within a workbook, you can organize your analysis by page, and then of course you can share the page. The results of your analysis are displayed in cards. Really, really simple. We'll get into more of that in just a minute. Linda, why don't you continue on here with working with insights.
So how we actually work with insights. So you saw a little bit there as I was taking the information from the data pane, and we're just dragging the actual variable of interest. So that's exactly how we see it. So rather than having to add in your feature layer or your data set, then we map that, then you decide how you actually want to see that. The way we work within insights is whatever the piece of information you're interested in is the piece of information you drag from the data pane directly to one of the cards. So click on the data set name at the top, and we expose all of those fields that you have sitting within your data set. And we also look at those fields to determine what type of data it is. So as we bring that data set in, we do some semantic modeling behind the scenes to determine what type of data that is. So we'll determine whether it's geographic, so we'll show you it to be a shape, a location component. It may have time in it, we'll show it to be date. If it's a category, so just strings, then we will show it as that. Or if it's numeric, then you will immediately see it's numeric. So before you've even done anything with the data, you are already getting some understanding of what it is you're doing the analysis with, because you're getting that information from the data pane. So when you get started, you'll see here we've pulled out those different icons that you can see within that data pane so that you can immediately see what type of data it is. Now, the one thing to add to this is if you have a date time field within your data set, we will automatically pull out all of those different date time components from that date layer. So if you have just date in there, you'll see additionally you get all of these other fields within your data set. Now that's just a convenience thing. There's many times I've had to pull out, how many times something's occurred over the year, so you have to sort of reformat that field to pull out the year component. So it takes us milliseconds within the data to actually do that, so we just do that for you. So we'll give you the categorical, the numeric variable that's continuous for the time, and then we break out the different components to be the categorical data, so that then you can see things by month, by year, whatever makes sense for your analysis. The data sets we show with a sort of a gray icon. As I say, you click on that, it expands to show you all the fields behind that. Every time we do some kind of manipulation to the data, so every time you're actually viewing that in a slightly different way. So you're viewing it in a bar chart, for example. We're actually having to change that data a little bit because we're aggregating it by category. So it's a new way of you having that data. It's not exactly the same format as you had before. So we actually give you that result data set back in the data pane. You may want to do further analysis with it in that slightly transformed state. You may want to see that as aggregated by category. So we will produce that result data set into the data pane, and then you can share that back out to the portal if you want to use that data set for further analysis. Otherwise, it's just going to stay in there. It's going to be a part of your workbook, but will always be within that workbook when you want to come back to it. We also show the hierarchy between the different data sets that you have in the data pane. So imagine if you've buffered around some points, for example, we will show the buffer beneath the points to show you which one of those layers that buffer was actually derived from. So the same will go if a new result data set is derived from an original data set, you will see that sense of hierarchy within it. If it's something completely different, no relationship to other data sets, then we will obviously bring it in as the top, more perhaps where you'd expect to see it initially. So just a few little features that you have within Insights. So you can rename any of the data sets anywhere. You can rename any of the fields. It's just a case of clicking on the little pencil icon to do that. So once you've done that, all of the other cards will reflect that rename. So if you want something to show up as that name, we will do that. These aren't going to be changing your underlying data. We are not changing original data in any way. So this is just a way of you actually seeing this as you're working with it. We can also add in a second piece of information on the pop-ups. So if you want two pieces of information on those pop-ups, you can actually change that so you can see it. We can also change the actual type of data that you have. So if you have a numeric variable and you want to change that to a category, so a good example of that is a zip code. It's a number, but we want to treat that as a unique value, then you're able to change that to being a category in that case, or you might want to change something to being a rate ratio or a percentage, then you can also change the value to be showing as that. So we've already mentioned that we treat maps, graphs, and tables equally. So if you drag them across, we make sure that we use sensible defaults for everything, but the default is not necessarily the best in many cases. So we're just trying to make sure that you're not going to make a mistake. Everything is going to be fine. But if you hover over that drop zone a little bit, then you'll see we actually give you a number of different options, and we only give you the options that are possible with that data type. So that's another advantage of us doing that semantic modeling. When we bring it in, we know the type of charts or the type of maps that would make sense with categorical data compared to numeric data. So they are the options that we will give you based on what you pull across. So that also means that if you want to create something, for example, like a scatter plot, and you know that takes two numeric variables, you need to drag two variables across. Then we will give you that option for the scatter plot. So just think about what it is you actually want to do and take those variables of interest, and then we will give you the options as to what you can do with those.
Linda, you didn't introduce our little guy there.
So this is Dr. Drag and Drop, because everything is very much about
that little dragon there. Dr.
I love the way there's always like a pause and then a groan.
Yeah, it's like, what's this? Sorry, we had to bring him into our session somehow. So.
There you go. Okay. So I already showed very quickly how everything is automatically interacting with each other. So that's very much the idea of working with the cards, that we will allow you to see the data in multiple different ways, so you can view them with all these different visualizations. But as long as they come from the same data set or they're connected through joining the data sets, then they should update based on each other. So that's what we do by default. It will automatically update. It will select out the other features based on whatever you're clicking on any of the cards. So there is a subtle difference within this. So you can do selections, filters, and cross filters. So selection is going to pick out the piece of information you're interested in. So you'll see on the top row of these three that's actually performing a selection in all of those three cards. So what that's doing is it's showing you the piece of information you're interested in that you've clicked on, and it's showing the others sort of muted out a little bit, but you're still having the context of all of that other information. So if your data is classified, it's classified by the whole data set because you're looking at everything. On the three little cards that you see below that, I've actually put on something called a cross filter. So what that's doing, what any kind of filter is doing, is actually pulling out just the piece of information and ignoring the rest. So imagine if you're now classifying that data, it's only classifying it based on the pieces of information that you've selected to see. So it's going to show you something different. So you'll see with some of those, it's almost like zooming into that piece of information. It's losing the context of the other. All of them very valid approaches, but you're looking at the data in a slightly different way. Some of it, you're wanting to see how it relates to the rest of the data. Sometimes you're saying, I'm not interested in that area. I want to just zoom into this area and just pull out the patterns from that. So you have that ability to do that. You can also filter out your data on the data pane to reduce what you're doing your analysis with. So let's say you want to filter it to just California, then all of your analysis, all of the cards that you create are just going to be using California. But you can also filter between the cards. So if I now want to say I want to see the data in 2017 and 2018, I'm going to filter on my actual card. So I have that side-by-side comparison, and I'm not reducing my entire data set for the whole analysis. So you have different locations where you can do that filtering too. We also mentioned that we can allow you to do work with maps, charts, and tables. So there are two different types of table, very different functions. There is a card table, which is essentially a pivot table. So we're pivoting that data so that you can see the count, and you can have two categories and any numbers, any number of numeric fields with it. And that's sort of pivoting that data and giving you a whole new data set that you can work with. We also have what we call the data table, which is equivalent to the attribute table within GIS. And that's giving you a view into all of the data that sits behind that data set. That's also where you can do field calculations and you can do further analysis on it. One key point in terms of the calculations, it will appear to be a part of that data set. So it will appear as part of that original, let's say, data set that you've brought in. But remember I said we never touch your original data. So actually what we're doing is we're doing a view behind the scenes. So that original data remains unaffected. The version that you have within the workbook, or that even you share back to your portal, will have that newly calculated field added into it. So everything is designed to be interactive within Insights. So if you click on things in the legend, so if you click on any of the colors or in categories, then you're able to change the color there. You're able to select out the data on the category. So you can actually interact directly with all of the data right there. So I think this is just an example of how the selection will work. And this also allows you to sort of filter out information. If you want to just select a category within your data, you can pick that on the legend. That will select out those areas, and then you can literally pick up and drop that to a new card. And remember, every time we're creating that card, we're creating the result data set in the data pane. So that's now given you a new data set to do further analysis with. So there's a few examples that we have here of the type of analysis we're doing. So we do a lot more than just the visualizations and the cards. There's a number of different analysis tools that we can do in there. for example, predictions, so we can do regression to see if there's correlations between variables. We can also predict to locations or different values using the ordinary least squared. We can do sort of spatial filters and aggregations if we want to summarize and understand those patterns. And there's also access to all of the variables with enrichment, so you can add in all sorts of different variables. We have lots of demographic variables and beyond that you can add in to understand and enhance the analysis that you're doing with your data. So the models that we have within there, this not only allows you to understand and record that data so that you can rerun it another time with different data sets, different times, it also allows you to understand exactly what you've done in an analysis. So if you've done something a few weeks ago, you can't remember what it is, you have access to all of this information within any of those pages. So it's essentially the sort of the model behind the page, and we'll show you the steps of that analysis. But you can also click on the edit in there, and it will actually allow you to see each one of those, for example, filters or aggregations, so that you can see exactly what you've done as part of that. And remember all of the data sets that you're creating throughout your analysis, creating the charts and pivot tables and stuff. You could use all of those in further analysis. So you may pivot your data to, for example, by space and time. You can then join on those two attributes, doing a compound join, and then take that to do more advanced analysis. So I showed a little bit how you can share out the pages. As I said, it's very much a part of that analysis, but you can share out that data. You can include things like filtering, and they can use the interactivity, so they can explore all of the results you've done. They can also see the model, but what they can't do is actually change anything. So they're able to see all the steps of what you've done. They're able to see the interactivity that's been set up, but they can't see the data pane at all. So they can never go back and actually amend the analysis in that way.
Let's take a moment here and actually do a deeper dive and actually perform a proper analysis with insights. What do you think?
Right.
So let's make sure that we include the new Python in our stuff. What do you think?
I will. Cool. Okay. So I've got some data here that's to do with migration, so internal migration within the US, so movement across the country. So I'm going to bring in an Excel data set. Let's see where it is. Here we go. So I'm just going to bring in this data set. Did I add it?
I don't think you added it.
Did I not?
Yes,
I did. There we go. So I'm going to bring in this data set. So this is just an Excel data set. And I can see I've got the year and the total number of people who've moved. I'm actually going to create a column chart of that. So now we can see across these 30-odd years the number of people who've been moving. But really what we want to understand is the rate of movement. So I'm going to take, again, the year, but this time it's the rate of movement. And now we can see over this sort of 30-odd year period that this has been gradually declining. So over the last 30 years, the amount of movement within the US has declined significantly, less and less people moving. We could also have a look at that on a table, so we can see how many people have stayed within the same residence. So if I stretch that out, you can see that it's never really, and I can of course move this around, it's never really gone, it's kind of stayed around 80% of people are staying within the same residence year on year. So people are not moving a lot, and as I say, over time, it's actually declined a lot. So let's have a look at this by region. So I'm just changing to another page here. I have this county level migration. So I actually have in here the state where they were in, but I also have in this data set the state where they moved to. So I've already geocoded this one. I'm actually going to geocode this second value here. So I'm going to do it based on joining it to the destination state. I'm going to use the state's boundary, which is just data that Esri makes available. So you can just bring in that data for free. And you see now I'm enriching this data so that I'm now able to see the locations where person currently lives, the state they currently live in, and also the state that they've moved to. So I'm just going to rename this. Oops. If I could spell. Destinations. Date. There you go. So I now have these two fields, where they've come from, where they're going to, and I'm actually just going to create a map. So remember, I've now got two shape fields within this data set, so two location fields. So now I'm immediately able to see that movement across the different areas. So I'm also going to have a look at the regions that they've moved from, and I'm going to create a chord diagram of that so I can understand the overall pattern. And what we can do is we can go in and change this a little bit. So I want to be able to change the colors on this a little bit. So I'm going to make these gray. I'm going to put a little bit of transparency on this. I also, so you see how I'm doing this, the legend is actually very interactive, so the legend is allowing me to change the different features here. So now I want to see the destination region, is that correct? Because by default what we do is we color all of the charts exactly the same way so that they're matching. So if you're seeing one category in one chart and the same category in the other chart, as you'll see here, you're able to see that they're in exactly the same color. So let me make this a little bit bigger so we're not all squinting at that. Just going to zoom in a bit there. So now we're able to see, and this is, I think, 5 years worth of data, we're able to see this movement. And here we'll be able to use the interactivity. So you'll see here that I've created this chord diagram. I could see everyone who's moved out from the northern region, and I can see everywhere that they've gone to. Or if I just want to see the internal movement, so this is a new piece of information that we didn't have before, because we've actually created this by creating that chart. You can see now I can see that internal movement, and if I just want to do further analysis with that, I can pick that up and create a new map, and that will allow me to now have a new data set, which you'll see is appearing there, of just that internal migration within the northeast region. You'll see here that the chart is updating as well to show me those totals, but you can see how quickly we can get started with this. We can also do things like the stacked bar charts, and remember we've got all of this statistics on the back. We can also add statistics onto the front, so if you want to see what's in the upper quartile or whatever the mean value is, or if you have a particular benchmark that you're interested to see where we've got higher or lower than that, you can easily add that data in. We could also then do some more advanced calculations, so we could look at something like the percentage change. So you'll see here we guide you through questions, so I can see things, how things have changed from year 1 to year 2. And I'm just going to call this change. And this is going to pop open that data table. Do you remember I said we do the calculations within the data table? And we can continue to use that interactivity, and I can pick up that new calculated field and just add it there. And I also want to add in the fact of which one of these states it's come from. So I just drag that variable for states across, and now we can see the average change, switching that there. And actually maybe it makes more sense to see it as a column chart, or I would say a bar chart. I'm going to do that alphabetically. But you can see how quickly we're pulling this information out just doing this analysis here. We could also explore this a little bit more and do some regression analysis to see who's going to be moving. So let's try and understand who might be moving out of each state, depending on how much maybe they've earned. And let's see, maybe how much they've moved in. I can see that as a scatter plot matrix if I want to understand if it makes sense. I can also run that as a statistics model, and you will see that that's now given me that regression model in here, which I can then drag and drop to another map to actually make that prediction for maybe a different year to understand that migration. So Python and R, you asked me to show the Python and R stuff. So this is new. This is what's going to be coming out in our next release, that we can connect into an existing console. So I'm just going to connect to that console I've set up. I'm going to use Python here to actually join. So you remember I've been talking about I've got 5 years worth of migration data. So actually when I collected this data, I had to collect it for each individual year. But what I did was I used this to actually join those 5 years worth of data. So it's a simple file, just goes to where I have those data sets, joins all those data sets together, and then we have magic commands which will allow me to bring that data set back in to the data pane. You see how I just added in there, and this is now 5 years worth of data. I could do it the other way around. So if I want to look at the data that's in Insights, and let's say I want to find the 90th percentile. So now I'm sending my data that I have in Insights. I'm actually using that within my Python kernel. So if I can remember, which I can't.
Do you have to describe?
Let me just cut and paste this. There you go. I know I'm cheating. So there you go. So I can use data from Insights, or I can take data from somewhere else, and then I can bring it back into Insights. Either which way, still works for us to do that. I could also use R, if I'd rather use R. So again, I'm going to open that kernel. Of course, now I've lost my connection. Let me get that. There you go. And this time I'm going to use an R kernel. So in this case, I'm going to extend the analysis to use principal components analysis, not that one. And I'm also doing a ridge plot so that I can see the patterns of movement. So that's a type of visualization that we don't have within Insights. So you can see here, we can now see the patterns within each of these states. We can pick out those few states that have very different migration patterns to the other ones. And I can drop that card. You'll see it's just reappeared there. So any analysis that I do in Python or R, I can drop those directly into my Insights page as well. So it really is interoperable in terms of working with Python and R. And let's say I now want to share the results of this analysis that I've done. Well, I can take it from any other pages. So let's go back to the very start. Let's say I really like this graph. You see I can pick up that chart, and now I can drop it on that last page. So I'm actually just going to decide to share out the results from here. So I'm just going to drag the results that I had, that I created in Python and R, if you remember. I'm also going to share out one of these nice maps that I created. So let's take this one. So now you see I've quickly built up that page. You can see I've already added in some icons of where the data set came from. I can add a description in there if I want to. I could add in something like a filter widget to allow people to explore the results of that analysis. And then it really is as simple as me just saying, share that page. And I have shared my results out for somebody else to, oh, I failed. I could just share out my results so that somebody else can explore those results. And that's as quick as I can do an analysis.
Very good, because we have literally 10 minutes left. So just really quick, That analysis is a real analysis. It was working with real data that was obtained from open data platforms. We downloaded the information. Obviously, you can see the new work that we're doing with Python and R. Everything that you're looking here, this is actually an early build that we're going to be releasing later this month. So everything that you're seeing here is the latest version, 3.2, which is coming out mid to late March, is what I understood. Cool. So with that, in our last few minutes together, let's talk about what's coming up. Not just this next release, but what's coming up in our next 6 months for Insights. The first and foremost thing is that new home screen. This is coming up in March. Linda kind of showed you some of this. The new home screen is a one-stop shop for any analyst that's working with Insights and the ArcGIS platform. In the 3.1 days and earlier, literally Insights was just a matter of the workbooks. And we heard a lot from our user base saying, we're tired of going from my workbook back out to Portal and Portal back into my workbook just to do anything. Whether I want to manage my Portal items, or I want to add a new data set, or I want to see what's exactly been shared with me, or my connections for that matter with data sources. So we said, okay, let's come up with a brand new way of exploring this information and make that available as the new landing page for anyone that's working with Insights. Now, from that one spot, you can add file geodatabases, you can add shapefiles, GeoJSON. You can manage and edit your data source connections that you commonly work with. SQL Server, not a problem. I have 3 different SQL Server deployments. I can manage 3 different connections, and I can edit them if my permissions or my user accounts change. All of this is a part of the new home screen, and it's going to continue to evolve as we go forward. Obviously, we just showed you Python and R. This is coming out as, to begin with, in a public beta version at this next release, 3.2, mid to end this month. I'm not exactly sure what date it is. I believe online it's on the 19th, and then shortly after that for enterprise. We want to work with the open data sciences community. We do recognize that a lot of the community has already downloaded and installed their infrastructure. This is in addition to what you've seen with the hosted notebooks. I'll talk about that in just a second. For Insights during the public beta and beyond, we want to enable you to connect to your existing infrastructure. If you have an existing Jupyter notebook, Jupyter Hub, Jupyter Lab, enable the Jupyter extension known as Jupyter Kernel, and talk to it over HTTP and WebSockets. That's really all it takes. Once you do that, take advantage of your existing infrastructure, your existing environment. There's no requirements on you as it's your own environment. Not only can you work with data from anywhere in Python, but you can also take the work that you're doing in Insights, share that back with Python and R, and then once you're done managing that data, working with it, you can bring that back into Insights. That, as well as other visuals that you can do, whether it's Plotly or Bokeh or whatever library that you choose to use. All the work that you do inside of Insights is very familiar in terms of the console and the editing experience. Standard in and out, just like a notebook server would, complete with IntelliSense, code completion, magic commands, et cetera, et cetera. So all of that is there, including history, so you can go back up and down. All the work that you do can also be saved. You can save it out as a PI file, an R file, or even as a notebook. And of course, we added some magic commands. One to begin with, but in the summer month when we release this as final, you'll have more magic commands that we've supported and supplied for you. Okay, and we actually have a session on this coming up at 2:30. We'll go into more details and have some more deep dives with it. Further on beyond our 3.2 release, we're actually working on more analysis and visualization functionality. When we first started down the road of creating Insights, the thing that we did not want to do is boil the ocean. We didn't want to throw a bunch of kitchen sink stuff in there, right? There's a saying, 80% of the world uses 20% of the functionality. That's where we started. We started with the most common analysis features that most analysts would want. And over the last 2 years, we've been increasing and evolving that to support regressions, predictions, We've commoditized the capabilities of link analysis, not just in the traditional link charts with centrality measures, but also across geographic space with link maps, also known as spider diagrams, desire lines, or flow maps, to include centrality measures and directionality. All of that is what we've been adding over time, and as we continue on, I've actually seen Linda's sheet. It's 17 pages, no pictures, all single line items as to what she wants with supporting documentation following that up. There's so much that we want to be able to achieve, and we're going to continue doing that, but not just analysis, but also different visualization methods in the box using the same user experience. We're going to continue to work on Python and R. As you begin doing your Python and or R models within the console, or even in other environments, you can bring those in as tools and extend those insights models. Extend the insights models with your own functionality. The beginning of our extensibility path for insights. Of course, big data. How many folks here are working with big data? Okay. How many folks have actually met little data? I've never actually met that person, so if you know her, please introduce me. This is a topic of discussion if you think about it, because big data means different things to different people. If you listen to the industry trends, it's the 3 V's and petabytes worth of information. But you talk to a lot of people that are on the ground, a database with 30 million records is considered big data to them, or an Excel sheet with 1 million records is big data to them. So big data means a lot of different things. For the world of insights, we want to work with all big data, whether it's large, big, whatever your definition is. We need to continue evolving that discussion and allow the analytics to be performed with it. One key thing about insights is we send the compute as close to the data as possible. So we're going to continue evolving that to support not just big data analytics. How many folks here know Mansoor Rod? Big data toolkit stuff? He's got a session coming up, I believe, Thursday. Yeah. Thursday afternoon. That's a good one right there, and we're actually collaborating with Mansoor and his team as well going forward. Big data analytics, but not just the analytics, but the visualization aspect of it too. Sometimes working with large amounts of information still results in gigabytes worth of information that you get as a result. How do you represent that? How do you visualize that in a very meaningful and purposeful way with intent? All of those things are being collected together, and that's the kind of thing that we're working towards. Everything that you've seen here, available as a standalone desktop product. And oh yeah, it runs on a Mac, not just Windows. Windows and Mac. I don't know about you guys, but I'm a Mac guy, so of course my team's going to build me a Mac product, right? No, seriously, desktop product insights as a standalone offering. We're going to begin with a public beta beginning this summer. We're hoping to have a public beta available this summer. Everything that you see here today will be self-contained and standalone. We'll have the ability to connect to and work with any of your ArcGIS infrastructure, whether it's on-prem or online. You can connect to multiple ArcGIS infrastructures and begin working with those. We'll have the ability to disconnect things. So if you started a project up in ArcGIS Online, you can actually select that workbook. It'll package it all up and bring it on your desktop, allow you to take it on a plane, completely disconnected, allow you to continue your work. When you get back, push another button, everything goes back up online. Those are the kinds of things that we're working towards with desktop. The other big thing that Insights really has a vision for is working with data regardless type. That means structured, semi-structured, or unstructured. This is a huge thing, which implies that our connector model for working with data continues to evolve to support structured, semi-structured, and unstructured. Imagine if you had a document library in SharePoint. And with our integration with SharePoint, you can literally tag those documents to a given feature on a map. And for this given area of interest, let's talk about the petroleum industry. I've got an oil well. I've got a bunch of field reports. Those documents are associated with that oil well. I want to take all those documents, simply drag and drop them, and begin analyzing them based on the information within the text. We're going down that road. we are moving that direction with more data connectors, but more importantly, allowing the users, this is a developer summit, right? So I got to talk about developers. Connector extensibility, and that's on two fronts. On the backside, working with beefy enterprise type data sources, Java. On the front end, working with JavaScript, talking to REST-based services such as Salesforce CRM or other data stores like Azure Data Lake or any of these other things. Guess what? We'll have a JavaScript connector. Those are the kinds of connector extensibility models that we're working on, and we'll continue to evolve those over the coming months. With that, I think we're right at time. Thank you very much. Don't forget to hit the survey. We actually read those. We need those to make things better. And we'll be up here for any questions if you have any. Thank you very much.